Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Way, a RUDIS wrestling podcast. This week we jumped into Chapter 5 of the book, Make Your Bed. The title of this chapter was called Failure Can Make You Stronger. So this is always an interesting conversation, right? When we jump in and discuss failure, because on the one hand, failure is typically the one thing everybody in life tries to avoid. But on the other hand, failure is also the one thing that we actually need to spur new motivation and growth in our lives. So I hope you enjoy the discussion Cary and I had about this chapter. If you're just joining us, you can head over to therudis.com to catch up on previous episodes and our other podcasts, as well as get resources for wrestling technique, coaching, interviews, custom wrestling gear and apparel, all at therudis.com. In addition to this episode, last week we had 4 RUDIS athletes competing at Final X in Lincoln, Nebraska, 3 of which actually made the world team. So I want to give a special shout out to Kyle Snyder, Sarah Hildebrand, and Kayla Miracle for making the U.S. world team, as well as a special congratulations to Isaiah Martinez and his epic 3-match showdown with Jordan Burroughs. So if you want to catch up on those highlights, you can jump on our Instagram page, or you can catch those highlights on our website at therudis.com. In addition to this, Ben Askren and I released our top picks for medaling at the World Championships. So if you want to see those, you can check out Thursday's episode of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast and let us know your top picks. For those of you that are interested in new product listings, we have more shoes in stock. We also will be getting in new Sly Fox singlets and compression gear next week. Looking forward into next week, Ben and I will be releasing 2 more RUDIS Wrestling podcasts, as well as Chapter 6 of Make Your Bed. So again, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the content, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Hey everyone, this is Cary Kolat with Matt Dernlan, and the podcast is The Way. How you doing, Matt?
Good, Cary. How's things going?
I'm doing good, man. We got the week started. We're getting ready to hit Chapter 5. But it's been a busy week. I know you've been busy too, and so with us, it's recruiting and all that good stuff. But it's been pretty good, man. It's been pretty good.
Yeah. So when are you guys jumping into your camps? I know you said something to me recently about it.
This week,
okay.
And next week, actually, it'll be next week. We start, and we'll have a camp into June, kind of runs into July, and then we have 2 in July, and then we move on, and then it's back to the recruiting, and the guys are getting back to school and all that good stuff. And so we've got about, some guys on, out training right now, about 20 some guys and taking summer classes, and, they're down there lifting and, doing all that good stuff and rolling around. But
so do you have a fair, yeah, I've been running around. We've been, with the Final X stuff going on and all the sponsored athletes we've had in the last 2 weeks. We've been bouncing around doing that, doing a bunch of shoe stuff, but it's just one thing after the other. So do you have a formalized training system in the summer, or how do you approach your summer training?
Well, it's all Olympic Regional Training Center stuff, so the guys are just doing the freestyle, and for me, if we do we're allowed to do individual sessions or 4-man groups, so it's just mainly focused on technique in the summer, and the guys lifting, but I give the guys a decent amount of freedom, that's how I like to approach it, because you get in the season, you're there's so many aspects that you're involved in, so. It's kind of like a free play kind of zone in the wrestling room, and maybe, a little technique with individual guys. And then, but they're doing a lot of wrestling, guys they always look good in the summer. Like the pressure's off and they're mentally rolling.
This guy's an All-American, that guy's an All-American, that guy's an All-American.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's the way it always goes.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Has your, I know in the previous book with Switch, we talked about the evolution of the program. Has your summer training actually evolved too? Now you're saying you give a lot more autonomy to the guys. Has that actually evolved as well?
Oh yeah. From where I started and the program. Yeah. Now we have older guys now, right? I'm really starting to hit that first crop of guys that I recruited and now they're seniors. And so, how it is with wrestling. If you make it to your senior year, the guys, in a groove. He knows the process. He knows the mindset. And so there's there's way more leadership with those guys than we ever had from, year one, and now we're in year 5. And so, yeah, it's changed. It's definitely changed. And it's, we're a more competitive team. And as you get more competitive, guys who are more serious about their own individual goals, and your recruiting changes, and and those guys start to draw those type of kids, right? You're always kind of drawing the people a little similar to you, and it just, the idea is to keep getting better. So it's definitely changed. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of parallels with this chapter, talking about the growth. Yeah. I don't want to jump into the book. I don't know if you want to intro the chapter, but some of the things that you were talking about with the development of your older guys, I think there's a lot of parallels, with, how failure can make you stronger, parallels in this chapter relating to a program.
Yeah. So this is chapter 5, and failure can make you stronger. And in this part of the book, he talks about when they're going through buds, is they call it the circus. And if you know anything about SEAL training, the circus is a process where once they're done with the training for the day, anybody that didn't succeed or came in last in the events that they were doing, or the training or the swim, they start the circus, and you'll do an extra 1 hour to 2 hours of training after you've worked all day long. And Admiral McRaven talks about how him and his swim buddies struggled. They were last in the swims all the time. And, so when they would get back, the bud instructor would always say, well, welcome to the circus. And, they would go out and they would do flutter kicks to make you a better swimmer, and all the other stuff that it would take. And, he talks about by the end, he got to the last part of training is something like a 5-mile swim. And, they get in there and they realized him and his swim buddy were the first ones to get in from all the extra work. So you can view things as punishment is what you can do. And you can have a negative mindset is what I get from it. You can view it as punishment. Coach made me stay extra. Coach made me stay after. Or coach is really on my butt. And if you have that mindset, you're going to develop a bad relationship with your coach. Or, you take the approach, and if you're trying to be a Navy SEAL, you suck it up and you do what you're told, and you basically gut it out. And there's a reason for it. There's a reason why they do these things. And, when your coach is training, there's a reason why, we're doing extra reps. So we're doing an extra, fake one side, hit the other side, in order to make the muscle memory react better and make you quicker and make you get to the point where there's no thought process in your wrestling. And, so that's what I get. I mean, there's so much about this book that relates to wrestling, specifically, that, it's just an easy read and good. But yeah, what they refer to as the extra is circus.
Yeah. And I think, it's all, you touched upon it, and you summed it up perfectly. But really, it comes down to the perspective of the athlete, or in this case, the perspective of the soldiers, right? It can be viewed as punishment, or it can be viewed as an opportunity. Like, these are the necessary things I need to improve on. And the only way I can improve on them is spend extra time in there. Like the way Admiral McRaven was talking about it, like they were last in the swim and they were trying very hard, right? But the reality is you weren't good at swimming in relative to the other guys in your class. So how do you improve your swimming? You spend more time in the water, right? You can't just talk about it or think about it. You actually got to get in the water and get better at it. Same thing with wrestling. If you get taken down 10 times with a double leg, you probably need to work on your double leg defense, right? And so, as a coach, you could throw these guys in and say, okay, we're going to spend the next, hour. We're going to spend the 3 days a week, an hour, 3 days a week working on your defense to your double leg. Now, perspective would be coaches punishing me, right? Or welcome to the circus. Let's have fun here and get better.
Right.
And so I think that's, every coach kind of goes through those situations where, you come out of a competition or you're evaluating your training and you're like, hey, we're not quite where we need to be. And especially when you jump in the season and you walk away from a competition and you're like, whoa, we're really glaringly weak in a certain situation. Well, you have to dramatically change that in a short period of time. So, kids or your athletes can view it as punishment that your conditioning's off, or your mental toughness is not quite where you need it to be, or your technique is not where you need it to be. Well, you got to jump in, you got to spend more time in it. And a lot of these times it's comes with a level of discomfort, right? And so what you were saying about perspective, like, how do you get better? You have to spend more time in there. You got to jump into the circus.
Yeah, you have to. And I like this chapter too, Matt. Like, this guy wound up being an admiral to finish out his career, right? And, he wound up leading all the SEALs. But he talks about in this chapter too, there's a point where he's removed from his leadership role of a group of SEALs. He's an officer. Something, doesn't go right, and they strip him of his leadership. And so, he said he had to reflect back on the circus because, he was last in the swims, and he paid the extra amount of time and the price with his instructors, and he got to the front. And then when he became an actual SEAL and was out leading SEALs, kind of the same thing. He faltered and made some mistakes and failed in a leadership role at that time. And then he was transferred and once again given a leadership role. Well, I know quite a few of these guys, and they really are big on the character of an operator or a SEAL, and these guys are impressive people. Like, I love being around the guys that I know, and so this guy said, this reputation followed him that he had screwed up, and he said so that was a reputation that you had to fix. And he said so how he had to fix it is he had to show these guys, I'm fit to lead and I can lead you. And he was up an hour earlier before everybody else. And the last one to eat in the chow line. And, the first one to go through the door when needed. He had to really step up his leadership role. And it was almost, he said, going back to the circus. I screwed up. And so the fix was more work, the right kind of work, the right attitude, and making those changes. And I really look at this is where I would kind of relate this to wrestling, is the people who are afraid to actually put it on the line, like who are afraid to fail, right? We've coached those guys where you can tell they don't do their best wrestling because the anxiety level is so high already that they're afraid to get beat, afraid to lose a match. And you can't enter a competition or a single bout, in a dual meet with the idea I could lose. Right, that's part of it. Right, you got a 50-50 chance going in. Technically, if you look at it, say I'm either going to win or lose. Right, so that's part of it. Now your training is what gives you the confidence to say, no, I've got a 90% chance of winning and a 10% chance of losing. And I feel like people who don't pay the price, who don't stay after extra, who don't do the extra work before practice or after, those are the people with the highest anxiety for the most part. Because I'm just a firm believer that the extra training, the extra reps, knowing that you've put the time in technically and physically and in the weight room and conditioning wise, then you can step on the mat and shake hands with full amount of confidence that you can get the job done. And that's being part of the circus. That's doing the extra work and jumping in. And if you don't do that, you're going to have high anxiety levels every time you compete.
Yeah, and for lack of a better term, just to keep piggybacking on the terminology of the chapter, the circus is necessary for so many reasons, and there's so many parallels that I took out of this book and relayed them to wrestling. One, it was when he had to rehabilitate his reputation with the SEAL team, right? Is one of those things that I would always tell my guys all the time. It's like, build your reputation today because your work ethic is recognized by your group, right? Your work ethic or your lack thereof is recognized by the group. Everybody knows what you're bringing to the table every single day. And I think when you establish the confidence and the work ethic in yourself, and you know that you can look in the mirror and say, I've done everything possible, that's also recognized by everyone else. I mean, if you're focusing on what you need to do, a byproduct of that is going to be passed along to your team. And I think that's an important component of having individual success is I know the guys on this team have my back, they believe in me, and they understand the level of commitment. So it's multiplied by the individual effort that you're trying to achieve. It actually helps when those around you are bought into what you're doing as well, and vice versa. So I think, that's important. And number two, what I pulled out of, the circus was the buddy system that it employed. He was in the circus with his partner, when he was failing in these exercises, he was doing it with his partner, Mark. And, for them to rise up, they couldn't do it individually. They had to do it collectively. And you see that so much in wrestling, where you see, if you have a really good 57 pounder, a lot of times your 65 or your 49 or both are pushing all three of you forward. Right. And so you see that a lot of times in wrestling is those guys that buddy up and they pair themselves. And I know you've made reference to this back at your time at Penn State with your time with Abby and the Hughes brothers and Cary McCoy. There's a reason why you guys all had that collective success, because you were all doing it together. You were employing the buddy system. You joined the circus together. You made those sacrifices together. And therefore, you pulled each other up and along with each other, like Admiral McRaven and his partner Mark did. They went from being last in the swim to being first. And there's no surprise that it was the collective efforts and the collective sacrifices that they didn't want to do at the time. Those were the things that pulled them to the front of the pack. And you see that so many times with your athletes. They group together, or similar personalities. It doesn't have to be a 25 and 33 pounder for you. It was you and McCoy in certain situations, and you were looking at your heavyweight. This is what he's doing. This is, these are the extra things he's doing. And this is a heavyweight. And, if the heavyweight's doing this, well, shoot, I'm going to do this too. And, the buddy system and how that is employed in sports and, in military activity, wherever. I think you see that in your professional life, how coaches, I'm sure you've got some coaches around your athletic department that you can point to that can help pull you along, and hopefully you're doing vice versa, the same thing for them.
Well, take it to more of a wrestling level too, like we were saying, I've always looked at it, and somebody said this to me and I started to pay attention, but at the Division I level at the national tournament, they said 5. 5 is always the magic number in terms of a program having success at the NCAA tournament. And I look back at all the teams that I was on when we had a good year and a high finish at the NCAA tournament. It was 5 All-Americans or 5 this. Like Penn State just put 5 in the finals not too long ago. 5 always seems to be the number of where it's at. And typically, like you're saying, you get back to it and you have this system of training and the guys you're feeding off of, and typically – it's almost like 5 All-Americans in a row. I know at Lockhaven we were like 1, 2. I think we were 4 in a row, and then we skipped 2 weights and it jumped up, or 1 weight and jumped to our 74, and then he was an All-American. And we all wrestled each other, but we were all close in proximity of weight class. And definitely 5 is the number in feeding off your competition and in the practice room, and your teammates is going to boost you and move you. I always kind of had a circus when I first started my intro into wrestling. My second year, my dad had all this thing every night at the end of practice. We would do 20 takedowns, and for every person who lost a takedown, it was 100 push-ups. And so, man, you saw the wrestling just increase. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I was 9 years old, I hated it. I hated the circus. I hated the push-ups, And I hated my cousin at the time because he was like 2 weight classes bigger than me, 2 years older than me. And I always felt like he sandbagged all practice. And then because he knew the 20 takedowns were coming, and then he would just turn it on and I'd get my butt kicked and I'd start crying. And, and that was, as a young kid, I was afraid of the circus. I was afraid to jump in. I was afraid to get into it. And so the problem was I would, anxiety would set in and then I realized, look, every time I went to a tournament, my cousin didn't do as well as I did. Well, I was extremely stronger than the kids I wrestled. And it was because I got my butt kicked by my older, bigger cousin, and I did more push-ups. And so when I stepped on the mat, I was stronger than all these other little kids. Then over the course of time, obviously you got to get better technically, but that was an aspect of wrestling. Strength is an aspect. And you use all the tools when you go into competition. And, so those extra nights definitely helped, but I still hate my cousins sometimes when I think about those nights. But it was good though. But anyway, this was, it's a chapter. Don't be afraid of the work. Don't be afraid of the work. Get into it, get dirty. And it's the old saying, right, Matt? Like first in, last to leave. You can't go wrong with that kind of mind. Being the guy in there and not wasting time in the beginning of practice when guys are sitting on the wall, and getting the most out of it in the middle, and making it a point to try to be the last guy out. You work until somebody else says, I'm out, and you're the last guy to leave. And, then you can pat yourself on the back, shower up, and get out of there. But you can't go wrong with that thought process.
No, without a doubt. And I think the beauty of this, like this whole book kind of like, it's one big flow of information, even though he segments it out into 10 chapters. But especially this portion of the book, it specifically ties, like it's all kind of tied together. Like, the next episode we're going to get into is like, you actually already touched on it. It's like, if you're going to do something, you got to be able to dare to do something great. You got to be willing to do something great. You got to be willing to put yourself out there, and then, so it's talking about failure and the necessity of failure and what that breeds, what failure breeds, and how it makes you stronger. And, how once you embrace failure, once you embrace what it takes to get stronger, now you're set up and in position to transition into chapter 6 and go out there and dare greatly to do something special. So these next series of chapters, they're almost interchangeable, and I'm sure we'll reference back, to chapters previously, or actually look forward to information that we haven't even touched on in the book. But yeah, it does a beautiful job of really, intersecting all the different psychological, mental, physical, psychological aspects of physical and mental training that go into life, go into wrestling, and everything in between.
Yep, absolutely. Well, everyone, again, this is Make Your Bed by Admiral McRaven, Navy SEAL. We're going to jump into chapter 6 next week. If you haven't gotten the book, pick it up. Easy read. And all right, Matt, I'll talk to you next week, man.
Okay, take care, Cary.